Hey, what is up guys, it's Lewpac back with another Albion Online video for you, and today I'm bringing you another meta snapshot video where each month we take a look at the 5v5 GVG meta for Albion Online, and of course this does spill over to Hellgate and to an extent arenas as well. Now I know April's video is a little bit late, we have actually spilled into May, but I hope you forgive me, I've been very busy with free to play launch, keeping the beginners guides up to date, and of course live streaming on top of it. So let's begin as we always do and start to talk about the tanks of Albion Online in GVGs. Right now then, the two top tier tanking weapons without a doubt are the Ironclad Staff from the Quarterstaff line and the Heavy Mace from the Maces line. Hammers seem to have dropped off the map completely in the current meta. I don't know if this will change in the near future, especially with Maces getting a very interesting new AoE silence Q ability in the upcoming balance patch. So both weapons have a slightly different playstyle. The Ironclad focuses more on displacement and disruption with the Hurricane and Cartwheel abilities. The Heavy Mace focuses more on crowd control and silencing and purging with the Snare Charge and the Battle Howl abilities. The way the healer situation is in the game right now, both of these kind of have their counter healer. So the Ironclad is good at countering the Holies because he can interrupt a lot of their spells, and the Mace is super good against the nature healers because he can purge all of their heal over times and of course the protection of nature buff. That's not to say that the weapons aren't good against the other healer of course, and right now in Albion both healers are being represented. Last meta snapshot we mentioned that the Staff of Balance was being played a little bit to counter specifically double healer comps, but actually double healer comps seem to have disappeared along with the Staff of Balance, and it really is those two tanking weapons, only the Ironclad and the Heavy Mace, that are seeing play right now. Hopefully there'll be a way for Hammers to come back into it so we get full representation, but we'll have to see what's coming on the horizon. Tanks are generally rocking the Judicator armor currently in the meta for that big defensive bubble ability. Boots of choice are Fiend Sandals so that they can swap people who are doing spells they don't want or aim to isolate targets. And then the head slot, there's a lot of toss up right now. A lot of people are still using cloth helmets with that bop ability to try and add to the displacement, especially Ironclad tanks or Mace tanks if they're facing a Fallen Staff. And some people are actually still rocking the Demon Helm, and I really like the Demon Helm because it kind of forces people to run a cleanse in their lineup and change about a bit. So the Ironclad with the Demon Helm is particularly powerful because does the healer run a Knight's Helm to prevent the Ironclad from displacing him, or does he run a Cleanse Helm to cleanse the silence? Because if he runs one, he gets hit by the other, and it forces him to make some difficult decisions in terms of his build. So on to the healers then, and good news, Nature and Holy are both being represented in a pretty good way. Right now in GVGs, the Holy is generally the Fallen Staff is the go-to staff with that big reset ability, able to top up your entire team at once and get them back in the fight. Combine that with the tanks and their Judicator bubble, it is a serious amount of healing output. I've seen a few teams actually using the Redemption Staff to good effect, especially when you're on the offensive. That bouncing Celestial Sphere is able to just keep your front line topped up without putting your healer in danger, which is super good. I expect to see a little bit more of it in the future, especially as more and more people start to aggressively counter the Fallen. But yeah, Holy is in a pretty good spot. Most Holy healers are running a Cleric Robe for protection, Blink Shoes, and then generally either a Knight's Helm or a Merc Helm, depending on whether they need displacement immunity or a cleanse. The nature healers, the Druidic Staff is the go-to staff right now. Not seeing anything else played really in 5v5s at the high end. It offers, you know, that amazing protection of nature ability and the uncleansable spiritual seed on the E, which is really good and reliable. The nature healers, because they don't care so much about displacement, generally they are running a Graveguard Helm for that extra emergency heal because they don't really lack that insta heal ability of the Holy Staffs, so the Graveguard is super important for saving teammates. However, this does leave them very vulnerable to Ironclads because they don't have a Knight's Helm, and they don't even have a cleanse if they do get silenced, because they can run a cleanse on the W ability, and some people kind of do, but Protection of Nature is just that good. I just think you cannot pass Protection of Nature up. It's such a powerful spell. It makes you so tough. It amplifies your healing. It's one of my favorite spells in the game. Nature healers in particular do have to be careful for certain comps though right now. You know, a lot of people are running this great curse staff, range DPS, heavy maces, and even the one-hand arcane can be pretty dangerous because of its ability to consistently purge the Protection of Nature, even though it doesn't remove the heals. So big purge comps are a problem for Nature. Both of the healers play completely different. Obviously, Nature's better on the move because you can move. You don't have cast times on your abilities, which is super nice. Whereas the Holy is great in a stationary fight, dropping that big reset and just turning the momentum of a fight in a split second. Obviously, with Holy, you've got to be careful though. If the reset gets cancelled, that can literally win and lose fights right there and then. So onto the melee DPS then, and the daddy of the scene is still that Heron Spear, Mistcaller, Soldier's Armor, Stalker Hood combo that we talked about in the last video. It's just so powerful. It offers AoE damage, it offers massive armor pierce with the Mortal Agony, it offers an AoE stun. It's tanky, it's offensive, it's got a good range on the lunging stab. There's nothing not to like about it. Obviously, it's kind of vulnerable to purge as well, similar to the Nature Healer, because if the Soldier's Armor's constantly getting purged, then, you know, you're not going to get your optimal damage output, you're not going to get your CC duration on the Spear Chuck, but it is super good build, and it's why we're seeing it in the majority of GVGs right now. I've seen a few people dabbling in axes. Offensive axe builds are still a thing. Generally, it's the halberd, sometimes the bear paws, but honestly, compared to Heron Spears, they're super underrated. The explosion we saw recently of dual swords with the spinning blades seems to have quietened down a little bit. A few people are still running dual swords as the offensive bruiser on a lineup, but it's nowhere near as spammed as it was on launch. Heron is still bossing the scene, and the rest of the weapons, in my opinion, they all have playable options, but they're not as represented as the Heron Spear. I still, daggers, the Bloodletter is still kind of viable, especially when we get to the crossbows later and we talk about that insane burst damage that they're currently offering. But bruisers aren't in the best spot. They're probably one of the weaker areas of the game right now in terms of variety, and whether that's just because the other stuff isn't good or because the Heron is just that good, I don't know. Hopefully with the upcoming balance changes, we've got a balance patch coming, I believe, next week, so hopefully we're going to see a little bit more variety creeping into the bruisers of Albion Online. So let's talk about range DPS then, and as the title of this video suggests, the crossbow is back, and in a good way, or a major way in fact. Crossbows are in almost all of the 5v5 comps now at the top end. The recent buff to the auto fire ability has just put the damage it can put out off the charts. The one-handed crossbow is running amok right now in the scene. The offhand choices are varied depending on the size of your balls. The bigger balls you have, the more offensive you go. So the biggest ball boys are running the Crypt Candle, which gives you huge bonus damage, but also amplifies damage you take, which on a clothy is kind of wild, but if you get your full spells off, it is insane damage. Then you can go to the Muzak if you're medium-sized balls, and if you got little tiny balls and you want to play safe, you can rock a Facebreaker or a Sark as a shield. Most people are running the Cleric Robe, although Mage Robe is a situational choice. Defensive Helm or a Fiend's Cowl for the Purge, and Blink Sandals seem to be the standard on these crossbows. Most comps really at the moment are running a 2-range DPS setup, so the crossbow is generally being paired with either a Great Curse Staff or an Infernal Staff. The Infernal still has that uncleansable contagious fire, offers insane damage with the Snapshot of the Druid Robe when it's cast. However, there is a change coming, I believe, to Guardian Helm, which is going to make it able to cleanse Infernals, so we might see a change up in the fire meta. And then the other option is, of course, the Great Curse, particularly when you're facing a nature. That Desecrate Area of Decay ability, that combo is still absolutely lethal on clumped enemies and just offers huge consistent value in your damage output. However, it's not as bursty as some of the others, but it's still a very, very solid choice, especially against nature healers. I want to give a special mention as well to the Great Frost. A few teams are using the Great Frost staff, and I still consider it a bit of a sleeper weapon. It's very underrated. You've got double mobilities on a Blink Frost. You've got an instant cast AoE, a damage drop, especially paired with a mace when they're clumping, is super good, and a Heron Spear. People don't seem to be running it as consistently as the Fire or the Curse, but I honestly think that Great Frost is a top tier weapon in the right hands and offers huge damage output. Arcanes, however, seem to have just dropped off the map completely. I've barely seen any Arcanes. We might see the return of the Great Arcane Staff as the Time Freeze ability is getting a bit of a buff in the next balance patch. I'll probably do a patch notes review over the weekend. I'll try and knock one out for you guys and talk about the upcoming changes in the patch notes. But yeah, Arcane seems to have disappeared. A few people are keeping it as a backup set, but it's not really being popular right now, which is a surprise because it does offer still a huge amount of damage output with that Frazzle and aggressive caster abilities, and it's a surprise not to seeing it more represented. So the last one we're going to talk about then is bows. We've always wanted bows to make an appearance in the scene, and finally they are cropping up. I'm seeing a lot of people using the Whispering Bow and the normal bow in 5v5s right now. Now, as we've always said, both bows are kind of vulnerable to Purge, which is a shame, as being purged, you know, really shuts down the damage ability of the ultimates on bows. The problem is they're also super vulnerable to Forceful Swing. So whether you're playing against a Mace or an Ironclad, both tanks have an option to completely shut down the bow. Forceful Swing renders you unable to auto-attack for a while, which is basically all of the bow's damage apart from the Deadly Shot ability. That said, people are still playing it and having success with it. You just got to be a bit careful with your positioning. Some people are using this cheesy strat where you equip a Whispering Bow, activate the E, and then swap to a different bow. So you've got the additional range of the Whispering Bow, but on a different bow's abilities. And then they're actually able to get Enchanted Quiver up on a normal bow at the same time, which is wild. But that only works at the start of combat. You can't do that mid-combat, obviously, once your items are locked in place. It's nice to see bows getting play. The normal bow in particular can do a frightening amount of single target damage, even to a tank if left unattended. But I do think they're not quite top tier yet because they are purgeable. I wouldn't mind seeing the ultimates from bows become unpurgeable. I don't think that would be unreasonable because they don't offer the most utility outside of their damage. So being able to be shut down so easily seems a little bit unfair to them in the 5v5s. Overall, though, I think that we've got quite a diverse meta. It's pretty fun to play right now. The GVGs are quite varied. The time to kill seems to be in a good place. You know, people aren't getting insta-gibbed within seconds. I mean, the crossbow does do a ridiculous amount of damage. Let's not beat around the bush. The crossbow is getting a nerf to auto-fire in the near future because it just is a huge amount of damage, but because it's a range DPS, they're usually hitting the tank or the other bruiser, which means they can be saved. So I think the crossbow auto fire getting turned down is a good thing, but you know, people aren't getting insta-gibbed. There's a lot of strategy in fights, managing your resets, managing your cooldowns, and basically looking for, depending on your tank, looking for either that isolate and kill play or that enemy clumping up and just AoE pressure that they can't recover from. As this following example from Skuzkabel will show, when the AoE syncs up, everybody's in trouble. So anyway guys, I hope you've enjoyed this month's look at the GVG and 5v5 meta of Albion Online. I'll be doing another one for May in the very near future. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe on the channel, and if you do love my content and want to support it further, please consider becoming a supporter on Patreon. Thank you for watching guys, and I'll see you next time.